I think most of us, myself definitely included, like we have something happen after that. We're like, man, I have this sin I can't kick, or I had this issue in my family, or this issue in my marriage, or whatever. Like, and all of a sudden it brings us back to this like place of like, man, I really still need God. I can't save myself just by, doing good things or putting on a good show.
Welcome, Bob Lesnefsky, to the Father Leo Show. Honestly,
thank you.
Great.
It's an honor, man. This is a treat.
Get out of here.
Yeah, dude, it's so good to see you.
It has been a minute, as the young ones would say. I mean, I keep using that line, but you would actually be able to relate to them. You are the Director of Evangelization for the Franciscan University at Steubenville. So you're always working with young people.
Yeah, it keeps me somewhat young.
And so tell me, what does that job look like? Because you don't look like the guy.
Yeah, it's funny. Whenever I do, so I speak at the orientation for the new students and the parents. Whenever I get up there first, I always say, like, I'm so grateful they started this prison release program, and they're like, and and it's funny because I always get a laugh and stuff like that, but almost every year, this one kid at the end last year came up and said, so what did you go to prison for? I was like, I didn't go to prison, and then this lady asked me one time, sweetie, what did you do time for? I was like, I didn't, it's just a joke, but people just,
Well, yeah, that's why you're clickbaitable.
I know, exactly.
I mean, they take one look at you, they do not think of evangelization. They think of running the other side.
Yeah, but it is, even from back when I was doing Vagabond and, working with inner city kids to now with the college kids, it's like for, by and large for young people, it's like it's not as much of an issue as it is for like maybe a parent or someone someone older, and there's a lot to be said about like it used to be sailors and prisoners and people in gangs that had tattoos, and so but now it's different, and I feel like sometimes it gets me like a shoe in the door that I wouldn't otherwise get.
Well, because you're also the chairman of Vagabond Ministries, but you were also the founder of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so me and my wife back in 2006 started Vagabond Missions, and back then it was called Dirty Vagabond Ministries.
Yeah.
And
Dirty.
Yeah, when I wasn't president anymore, they changed the name to make it less
dirty,
less weird. Yeah, less dirty. Yeah.
And what was the point of that?
The name Dirty, or the change?
No, the Vagabond Ministries. Oh. We know what dirty is.
Well, the whole point was to reach out to inner city kids. For us, we had an experience really early on in our marriage, working in New York, where we just realized, man, there's a lot of young people who are not being reached by the church, and it's for various reasons, from lack of resources to, man, if I'm going to be a youth minister, I'd rather go do it somewhere where they pay me more or it's easier, but whatever reason it wasn't happening, there was this kind of vacuum in young culture where there's these inner city kids, and they really were hungry, and really, like, as we started to
what do you mean by hungry? Because
as we like kind of stepped into that arena, we realized very quickly that in some ways it's easier to a lot of times people will be like, oh, I don't envy what you do, or what you do with those inner city kids must be amazing and scary and stuff, because we've just all seen movies about inner city kids, and then some guy comes in and he's dodging bullets and he changes their life. But for the most part, like these people know they are in a bad spot. They know they need a savior. For most of us, myself included, it's easy to kind of fake it, hide behind something else. We have our stuff or our friends or our jobs, whatever. And so I found that they were hungry in the sense of like needing a savior, needing someone to.
So what did you do?
Well, I wouldn't say that the actual bulk of the ministry of what we do is any different than probably a normal youth minister, but the kind of the approach was really different in the sense that there weren't parents that were signing them up for, their mommies weren't signing them up to come to CCD or something,
Sure,
like so you'd have
They
to
have
go
bigger
out to
fish to
where,
fry, yeah.
right. So you'd have to go out where they were. And, we just spent a lot of times in
So you just kind of
parks.
showed up?
Yeah, parks, walking through the projects. We just, one of our classics is just grilling. We just bring a grill and just grill food and, and just meet people. And sometimes it takes a long time, like one of my godsons, it took him 6 years of just kind of hanging around before he finally came in. He ended up, getting baptized, coming into the church. There's hundreds of kids that have been baptized, become Catholic.
But you kind of look the part for inner city.
Yeah. So it's a positive because, it's a conversation piece. It's, this guy looks kind of like us. We could talk about nothing else. We could talk about tattoos. I don't seem like a fish out of water.
How did you get into this? Because, did you grow up wanting to be a Christian tattooed preacher?
No. I grew up, I say I grew up in Philly, but I grew up in the suburbs outside of Philadelphia and just be, like a well-to-do kind of white suburban,
Privilege.
paradise. Yeah, for sure. And, Bob Rice, who I know you have on your show, he's a strange part of of my story because he's kind of far from inner city, a lot further than me. But he was working, about 40 minutes away from where we were in New York, and he got us to come in and take this job. And so when we interviewed, me and my wife, who was my fiance at the time, we looked at his church and we're like, man, it looked like, this is old, dating me, but like. You're old, so you'd get it. You told me you're old.
I am old, but I hate you and love you at the same time now.
It's a small world after all. Yeah. That ride at Disneyland,
sure.
Like everyone's like holding hands.
Yeah,
that's what Bob Rice's church looked like, man. He was up there singing these like songs and everyone smiling and holding hands. And we were like, man, we want one of these. Like, I want to do ministry like this. I didn't want to do inner city ministry. I just wanted to do what Bob was doing, but we kind of accidentally fell into this parish. It was just a little broken down, inner city place. And it was, we were really upset, honestly, a few months in. Me and my wife, I remember one time we were crying, like, man, why? We didn't want to do this, Mm-hmm. But then everything changed when you start to fall in love with these kids. And
so what came first, the tattoos or the ministry?
I didn't get my first tattoo till I was out of college. So I was in the ministry when I was doing it.
So you were in the ministry, and did you think twice, like, if I get a tattoo?
Oh yeah. I remember I got one tattoo. It was my grandfather's name.
Where is it?
It's up here on my arm. It's just at the top of this AGK.
Okay.
And I got it way up there because I wanted to be able to be seen.
Sure.
And this lady in Philadelphia who did it, I remember her saying like, "Oh, these are pretty addicting." And I was like,
"They're addicting."
I think I'm like a one tattoo kind of a guy. That's what I said. I remember saying that, and she's like, "Okay, yeah." And here I am. It was.
How many do you have? Just on a practical.
Oh, I have no idea. But by and large, every part of my body is covered. Yeah, I got them everywhere. Not.
Image not needed.
Yeah.
No, I get that. Well, but it is addicting. Are you going to go into the fake?
No. My wife. Well, my wife always has these like
is she
places. She does have a decent amount. Not like me, but like she has her arms and stuff, or maybe a little on her back. But like she'd always be like, "Oh, I don't want you to do any on your legs," and then like eventually she would crack, and my legs are good. I don't want your stomach, and I'm like, stomach. But the face is like the last, frontier for it. I can't do the face, so she would have to be dead, but I would probably get a little something on my face.
Now, it is obviously it's had quite an impact because you really branched out. Back in the day, you were probably the first Catholic rapper. Right?
Yeah. Well, maybe Father Stanford Tuna, like around that same.
Father Stanford Tuna, but he's kind of like a singer, and
he's kind of a
rap into it.
Yeah.
But you were rapping, and this is back in the 90s.
Yeah. I probably kind of started recording in like 2000.
Really?
Yeah, that was right about when I started.
Okay, so 2000.
Yeah, I was like messing around doing stuff, like
known as
in college. But yeah. I really fell into that because I always have loved music and done different things with music in a band in college and stuff like that. But I fell in love with hip hop. I always liked rap, but more just kind of, I thought it was fun, just like every kid, but when I got involved in the inner city thing, I realized, hip hop it's like a way of life for them. It's not just like, oh, it's kind of the music we listen to. It's the way they dress. It's the way they do art. It's the way they experience, culture and movies. And I fell in love, and I really started to, in my intake of hip hop went like way up. And I was like, man, I remember telling my wife, I was like, I think I want to record some hip hop music. And it just was, I'd always I remember kind of shyly tell my friends, because it was kind of embarrassing, because I was like, man, I don't know if they're going to think this is weird, but I went for it, and I had so much fun. But for me, it was like a tool. And the thing that I really liked about it that was different than, say, just, like an indie singer songwriter is hip hop is like, it's rough around the edges. It's funny, it doesn't take itself too seriously, so I was good at those things,
But it's kind of hard to see a guy like you, again, white guy, privileged guy, and you just jump right into the hip hop scene. Do you see a difference or an evolution of the hip hop scene? Because again, I am old. I remember Sugar Hill Band, hip hop, a hippie to the hippie.
Yeah, of course.
And that was just a cool song to skate to at Skateland.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of evolved. Like Michael Jackson kind of brought some of it into it, and then
man, I mean,
Bambaataa, all these
totally, yeah. I mean, I think it's been pretty cool. I mean, like the earliest roots people trace back is like even the late '70s, and then the '80s.
That's right.
Blew up, but yeah, Sugar Hill, but I think one of the things that, like you mentioned about people like Michael Jackson and lots, and now it's in every genre, but it started to kind of bend these genres to where it's, it's in pop music. And now you can't have pop music without a hip hop influence. Even if there's not a hip hop, like a rapping bridge, there's something about the elements of how the song's put together, the beats, the post-production, that like hip hop is such a part of everything now, where it was kind of this weird stepchild of culture, and now it's kind of strong-armed itself into everything.
And I'll just ask you, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's any worse than rock and roll doing it. Sure. Like I do think and this might, some people might disagree with this, but I do think there's a lot of like implicit prejudice we have, and I think hip hop is one of those areas that shows that, in the sense that, there's lots of rock and roll songs, that are bad, that, you would hear it. Yeah, it's Skateland, different, sure, just parties and stuff like that, or playing as a football team's running on the field or something. But I do think suddenly, like when people hear hip hop, at least more when I was a kid. Now it's so out there that maybe it's less. But it seemed like, oh, the rap, these gangbanger, tough, whatever. They noticed like the sexualization of the lyrics and the roughness and the language and that kind of stuff. But it's a lot like the inner city thing I was saying earlier. It's just it's not as disguised. It's really rough, but it's always been there. It's just, sure. I'm not saying it's because it's been come from Black culture that it's happened, but I do think because the culture is so different from maybe what most of white pop culture is, I think people sometimes attribute it to like, oh, it's this Black angry culture. And
I kind of want to get into that. I mean, I hope you don't mind the social context of it all, because it does create a mentality, and you see hip hop. I mean, I don't even know how to call it anymore. Is it just still hip hop?
Yeah, hip hop, rap. I mean, there's a trap. There's so many different types of. Yeah, but hip hop is umbrella.
They'll use very derogatory. Like one of my guys was working on the food truck. He says, "Yo, Father Leo, can we play our music?" And I said, "Does it have the B word, the N word, and hose?" And he goes, "Never mind." And I look at that and I say, but why would you want to listen to that?
Yeah.
But at the same time, people do.
Yeah. Yeah. And
what do you say about that?
And the thing that's funny is like, the people that, like I read this article once by this guy, Ephraim Smith, who he writes a lot about pop culture, hip hop culture, and ministry, like the convergence of all three.
Yeah.
But he said, one thing that we saw happening real early on, where people were still buying physical albums,
Yeah.
like the number one consumer of this, angry hip hop inner city music is white suburban kids. It's
can
like
afford it.
90 something percent of the sales are not, and so it's everywhere. But I think the thing, like, I guess that I think of when it comes to the music, or even some of the rules that I would have, which are, similar to what you're saying. Like
Rules
with the
when
kid.
you were rapping?
No, I'm like maybe with my kids, with inner city kids, with kids. A lot of times kids would come, they would want to record music that they wrote and stuff like that. And so when they were recording and stuff like that, I didn't have as much an issue, like if there were curse words, if they cursed, even like, if they were saying the N word, like I feel like they can make that.
Were
decision.
you allowed to say it?
No.
Would you ever?
No.
And that's just because.
Yeah, I just because I feel like I think it's a derogatory word. I don't love that. I feel like a lot of times people in Black culture use that, but I feel like it's their prerogative. You know what I mean? If like in a lot of senses, they took something that was, holding them down and derogatory and all this kind of, and they've kind of turned it into something different, like like a term of like familiarity, a term of like almost like a term of endearment, which is really weird. And I think like for us to be like, you can't do, it just seems a little bit weird to me to say like you can't do, and it's just like I'm not going to do that, but so I think there's gray area there. And I think people can make good arguments on both sides. Like they should never ever use it. It's up to them. But the stuff as far as like the vulgarity and stuff like that, I found one thing in hip hop that is like kind of always true about hip hop is that it really makes an effort to be raw and real. And I think that there's something there, especially when some of these young people or even like hip hop artists are like expressing like angst and pain of their life. To me, it's okay for it to be ugly. Where I'm never okay with it is when it's like degrading women, when it's elevating sin.
But
like,
isn't that the majority of what we're seeing now?
Yes. I do think that's like prevalent, even.
What do you think about that as a man who involved himself in that culture?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I had my toe in it, I was never like I was a hip hop great or something, I like doing it. I like using it, especially for ministry. I think it's sad that it a lot of times it's kind of like boiled down to the lowest, basest form, but such is humanity so often, what I mean? I feel like, again, I think you could find that in just about any genre of music. Country music, you could find that too, where sometimes people will hold that up as like, oh, it's just, stories about people and their dog or whatever. And it's
dying.
And yeah, but there's a lot of dirty lyrics in country music, so I hate it. I think it's really sad, but there are some people, like not even just Christian people, but there are some people I feel like that have, in the last 10 years, like purists that have said like, we've got to like take hip hop back for what it was, even not nothing to do with God. Like this is a voice of the people. Like it was a way that we could tell our story. It was a way that, like all these kind of things are very different than what it is now.
Well, obviously music influences people.
Yeah.
I always believe that if you don't enter into it, and kind of occupy some space for just like goodness, then it's just going to remain bad.
Yeah, John Paul II has, and this I always would use, I still use this as kind of a get out of jail free card with the tattoos sometimes, but he had this quote that I'm sure but I always reference it, where he said, if the church holds back from culture, then the gospel falls silent. And it's that whole idea that like, if there's a void wants to be filled, so like if we hold back from culture, even if it's hip hop,
correct,
even if it's inner city, if it's whatever, like something will fill that. And we don't want there to be a void.
How did you get your faith to be so real for you? Because I guess people will look at you again, you're very clickbaitable. They'll take a look at you and be like, hey, what's this about? But how did you get it? And how did you keep it?
Well, I think, like for me, I had there was a guy when I was in high school, and even through college who mentored me, like one specific person. And
Like a youth minister of some sort, or
so Jim Beckman, you know him?
of course.
So Jim, I was in eighth grade, and Jim was leading a retreat outside of Philadelphia, and he like had this whole like, you know, like I feel like God's telling me blah blah blah, just, you know, like all this stuff like after. And I was like, whoa, it's kind of weird. And he was saying like, you know, I think you're gonna live a life of ministry, all this stuff. And it was like my first encounter with God, and I thought it was kind of weird. But
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, you know what I mean, especially now, like having eighth graders, and you know, like, you know, you're like, man, they're so weird and little, and I would never, you know, I'd hardly want to talk to them, let alone like, you know, say like, hey, and you're probably going to do all the, you know, it just was a little weird now having some context. Yeah, prophetic.
Yeah, it was like prophecy.
Yeah. And but he all through high school, like he would send books, he would write letters. I mean, this is, you know, dating me again, but like
Really?
he would, he came out to visit my house a few times, and but really was someone that you know, I had some issues with my own dad, and there was my family was kind of crumbling at the seams. And so there was this image of someone who I was like, man, I think this guy is, it's kind of what I want to be. And there was just a lot there intentionally, you know, of
Jim Beckman is how you want it to be.
I mean, I know now you look at him, ABS, and it's too
So
different. Yeah.
clean cut. I mean, he kind of looks like a Catholic.
Yeah, nerd, dude. It's
I didn't say nerd,
Oh,
Jim. Sorry. I never said nerd. I was going to say Mr. Rogers, okay? And then you come out calling him a nerd.
No.
No, but he is very straight.
Yeah. But it wasn't that I wanted to be him, but it was the first time, I really remember this. It was the first time that like when he would talk about God, I was like, man, it just seemed so believable and exciting. And, you know, I was like, I want to know God like that, you know? But I asked
high school
questions.
kid.
Yeah, I really had a desire as a high school kid, you know, like I was your typical idiot high school kid and did, you know, messed up and stuff like that. But I've always, as long as I can remember, have had this like hunger in me, you know, like I want to know God, you know, and so seeing the way that he did that with me, and then even like I said, like I had some very difficult things like happen like in my life, you know, in relationships, family stuff, like seeing the way that he allowed like the messiness of that to kind of be put on the table and be like, okay.
Yeah, you know, people are going to ask, because I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of a messy thing that you had to deal with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I was in high school, it was you know, breaking up with girlfriends, but it was like as it went on, it was like my dad left my mom. That was just it was a really messy couple of years. But then I got married young. You know, I got married the night I finished at Franciscan. I got married in the chapel, you know, the morning before I had an exam. That the next night I got married in the chapel.
Talking about here at the university.
At the University of Franciscan, yep. And
you met your wife there.
Met my wife there, yep. And then 9 months and 1 day later we had our first, you know, and so it's just like, you know, a whirlwind, you know, and I was young. And
so we all know what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to have to say it, but yeah,
I'm good at math.
It was so funny. We had 9 months and 1 day that my grandma always was like, you better thank God it wasn't 2 days earlier. Like, you know, if it was a day before 9 months, it meant that we were like being impure. I mean, it's so stupid. But anyway, when I was, you know, so young in my marriage, I didn't realize how much baggage like my parents' marriage and these wounds from my dad and these things were going to bring into my marriage, you know? So again, it was like you know, I don't talk to Jim a ton now, but you know, my wife said like there's always been like key points like in my life where like I've somehow, you know, run back into Jim, and I've like, you know, processed some of this stuff, and it is kind of a cool prophetic thing, you know.
Yeah, you have your own. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, but the whole, you know, tie around with that is just that he allowed. And I think he made me see that God is okay with the messiness of our life, you know, and the brokenness, and he's okay with that. And then so for me, that's motivated the whole way I do ministry, is that God could handle your messiness.
So you're dealing with inner city kids to some degree. Now you're dealing with college kids. Now the college kids that would come to Franciscan University are clearly at a level of desiring faith.
Sure.
They don't want to live a woke culture
Sure.
that a lot of universities are unfortunately
Sure.
getting into.
Yeah.
So how do you prevent wokeness? Because unfortunately, woke and hip hop, they sometimes go together. And when I say woke, I'm talking about such a free thinking, there's no more any logic.
Yeah.
How are you as the director of evangelization?
It's hard.
Doing that?
It's hard because I think, like for instance, at Franciscan, I think we have a really unique group of students who come to us. Like you said, they come. It's explicit that most of them have a longing for God. Most of them have a longing also just to be virtuous, holy. But they have kind of the worst of the world too, in that even if they were homeschooled their entire life, they've you never looked at a TV their whole entire life, whatever.
Are there kids like that?
I mean, there'll be no. That's by and large no. That's not. But occasionally there'll be someone who they've been homeschooled their whole entire life.
Yeah.
And all I was going to say about that is that culture. And I made this point on Matt Fradd's show, and some people disagree with it, but it really, I think it's true that culture, whether we like it or not, it's a tidal wave. And I'm not saying it's impossible to be holy in the midst of like a tidal wave of culture, but it's impossible to not be affected by any of the tentacles of like the culture, this tidal wave. Like, so, I'll meet homeschool kids that, their parents have done everything they can. And this is what we do as parents. Like, we just try and I want to try and, get my kid to heaven. And I want to try and prevent them from sin and pain and all these things. But unfortunately, like, sin has a way of finding, its way. So there'll be even a homeschool kid that will come here and they've looked at pornography for years and years, so, and that's just an example of the weirdness of like, they have these kids that really have a huge desire for God and a huge desire for holiness, but they've been raised in a woke culture. They've been raised in a sinful culture where a lot of that stuff is still touching them. A lot of the access that
what
they
do you
have.
say to them?
Well, the first thing I try and do is, so we believe, like in my office, like I always tell the people that work for me in evangelization, like everything we do, I want it to be through encounter and accompaniment. Meaning like these are the two ways that like I think we experience conversion best. Encounter, just like we have these moments where we are able to encounter God, but also He's able to encounter us. And then accompaniment is just, it's friendship. It's walking with someone. It's normal things, what you're good at, just that you can be a normal person, a friend, a good listener, someone who walks and accompanies with someone. So I try and meet them in accompaniment, but I think the thing that oftentimes like a pitfall, even for a holy kid, is scrupulosity, because it's this really, like what I was about to say is like this bad mix of like a super huge desire for virtue and also like this culture that's been so, overhanded in the way, that like because they're dealing with most of the same sin as young people, and the same things from culture, they just have a horrible sense of scrupulosity. And I think most young people, especially guys, like their game plan is like, I'm going to hate myself more than I ever have before. And so the first thing I think is just to break that, like, that's not going to work. Like you have got to allow God to love you. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of them.
Well, there's a lot of people who come to Franciscan and they have certainly a desire, for the most part, very socially integrated, natural and healthy. But then there might be some people who come in with kind of that righteous attitude, like I'm not a sinner, I'm not broken, I am on my. How do you kind of touch people's hearts if they don't even know that they're broken?
Yeah,
they'll put up such a good front.
Oh yeah, I think for most people, it seems like this arc, of conversion is that like we're doing bad, right? Or we feel really bad. We experience God. We have this huge surge. We feel great. And maybe we're in a desire to just be holy. You know, it's like everything we do, like we grasp for externals and all these things, and we're just way up here. And I think for most people, like, and it's probably especially at that age, you're young and you're zealous, and you kind of think like, this is how I'm going to be. I'm going to live this way and do these things, and I'll never, be like all those idiots down there. It's just easy to fall into that mentality. Now, that's not by and large what happens, but I think most of us, myself definitely included, like we have something happen after that. We're like, man, I have this sin I can't kick, or I had this issue in my family, or this issue in my marriage, or whatever. Like, and all of a sudden it brings us back to this like place of like, man, I really still need God. I can't save myself just by, doing good things or putting on a good show, and then all of a sudden I think it brings us back to a place of reality. A lot of students will have that happen at some point.
Humbling moment.
Yeah, but a lot of times it doesn't happen until later. And so I feel like you try and give them the pieces to deal with it when their life are in peace.
And we can't force that.
Right.
I mean, it's just going to happen.
Right.
Let me ask you this, because I mean, you're definitely kind of a different dude. I mean, anyone is going to look at you and they're going to think you're a tough guy. You can kick butt. Or if you can't, you'll get wild and you'll find a way to do it.
That's right.
I mean,
I'll bite their nose off, man. I'll go right for the nose.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
You were saying you find a way. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly. You would find a way because they would take a look at you. And so in some people's eyes, you are a hyper masculine man, perhaps even toxic masculinity. And just let's address masculinity for a minute. And because again, if I want to be a confident man in myself, do I need tats? Do I need a beard? Because I mean, if I grow a beard, I'm going to look like Confucius. So tell me about masculinity and your thoughts on it, especially because you're raising some boys. Right?
Yeah, sure. I have 5 sons. Yeah.
You have 7 children?
7 children. That's good, man. Yeah,
5 sons. And how old is the oldest?
My oldest is a girl, Carie. She's 23.
Okay.
So she's a missionary Vagabond. And then I have 2 boys at Franciscan, all the way down to 10.
Do they have tattoos?
Yeah. So it's my oldest 3 all have tattoos.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, my daughter's got a lot. Her legs are like covered, but they're
really.
Legs, so, yeah.
This is just cracking me up a little because every mold has been broken, so to speak. So how do you tell your children about masculinity?
Yeah, I mean it's a really good question, and there's I feel like this is one of those topics that like I feel like you could go so many different ways, because I really do understand like some of the nervousness and arguments around toxic masculinity, because I do, you could boil it down to like I actually read a critique, like when I go on Matt Fradd's show, my wife sometimes she'll read stuff afterward, like she gets into like reading the comments, and I try not to read them because it end up making me like feel bad about myself, or like feeling too good about myself or whatever. But she like was reading these ones, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, of course, here's this guy thinks, and not talking about me, talking about Matt, but like you think you smoke a cigar, you talk about beards or fighting or whatever, and then he's got this guy with a tattoo, it's like, oh, this is great, you're such a man. So there is that part of you, and I don't think that's what he's doing, but there is that part of you that like you can kind of caricature what you've seen as like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm, like John Eldridge, that Wild at Heart book, his whole thing is like, well, every man's deepest desire is to be able to prove like I have what it takes to have a man. What
are 2 things that you're teaching your boys how to be? I'm going to ask you the same thing about your girls too.
Yeah.
So like 2 things that you want them to learn.
Yeah, that's a good way to boil it down. So I do this thing. I mean, I don't really do it with them anymore because they're not little. But I used to do when they're little. When I talk to boys, I say, "What are you?" And they would say, "I'm a warrior." And then I would say, "Why?" And these are the 2 things. There's 3 things, but I would say, "Why are you a warrior?" And then they say, "Because I'm God's son, because I'm your son, and because my heart is strong." And those are the things. Like I just want.
They would say that to you.
They would say it back. And because I wanted them to say like, dude, you could say this, you're warrior, you're loved, you're strong, whatever the thing, but you're these things, not because you can bench press a bunch, or because you have tattoos, or because of anything other than you're my son and you're God's son. You know, like you're loved only because you're mine. I don't care if you're never good at anything. You're a man because I say you are. You know, so in the same sense with the women, you know, I would do this thing. You know, what are you? I'm your diamond. That's what they would say. Diamond. Yeah. How come? Because I'm God's daughter, because I'm your daughter, and because my heart is beautiful, you know. And so it's this, you know, similar like core questions, you know. Sure. A woman wants to know, like, at my core, I'm beautiful, I'm valuable, you know. And a man, at my core, I have what it takes, you know. But the reason they have what it takes is, again, not because these externals that people would, you know, say is toxic. I mean, I don't know what to say, like when I say, like, well, what about you? You like beards and tattoos and bourbon, and it's just like, I don't do any of those things because like I'm trying to be, I just like those, but like I don't want to pretend that I don't like those things. It's just those things, I think they're fun. Absolutely. And maybe there was some desire at one point that I wanted to, but now I just like, I really like that kind of art. I really like.
Well, I think you've got your priorities straight.
Right.
I mean, on the grand scheme of things, your priority is obviously God.
Yeah.
Your marriage, your children, your faith, all that stuff. And then those extra things are just, it's part of life. You can't not live in the reality.
Yeah.
You know, when people look at you, what do you want them to see?
I would love it if, you know, when I was dead, you know, I mean, obviously, like the main thing, I was just, you know, man, that guy loved Jesus, you know, that would be on my grave. I'd love it to say just, you know, Bob's dead, he loved Jesus. You know, that'd be a good 2-line gravestone to me, you know. But the other one, like, I think just on a natural law level would just be, man, Bob was good at loving people. Like, you know, like that would be like good, because I think that leads us to Jesus. You know, like even people that like I don't like, for instance, like inner city people, like, you know, that sounds like objectifying, but I just mean like people in the inner city that I mean.
I live in them.
I think if I never get to end up talking to them about Jesus, the one thing I could do, even just in like a walk past, you know, or a 2-second conversation, is just I can make them feel seen and loved, you know, like. And so just I guess that would be the thing I would want somebody to be like, yeah, you know, maybe they're surprised by my kindness or gentleness or something, but I would want them to say, like, man, I really felt loved when I was around him.
You know, if you cook for your family, you know, if you're feeding your family, what would be the one thing that you would do, or what you would cook for them just to show that you love them? Oh,
that's a no-brainer, man. Whenever we have big things. In fact, we did it for Easter this past year, which my wife doesn't normally. She wants to have like a ham or something, but is like a smoked pork butt, dude. You know, I just covered, like, you know, make a mat of bacon, brown sugar, molasses, you know, and just slow cook it. Put coleslaw on the top. Just, I love that.
Where do people find you? And because you're still doing other evangelization efforts outside of Steubenville, you're speaking. Are you still rapping?
Yeah, most of the time when I go and I do events, like I'll still share a little bit of music. Like I don't normally do concerts anymore, but a lot of times, like if I'm sharing a story, like I have, you know, a lot of things like, I want to share this song, because one of the things I realized is that you can kind of like weave in like it doesn't have to be full blown hip hop. It could be like some singing with some hip hop. Yeah. So yeah, some of that still, but yes, I have righteousbee.com.
Righteous Bees.
Yeah, if they Google Bob Lesnefsky, which they'd probably have a hard time spelling, but Catholic rapper. They can find any of that if they Googled it. But and then Vagabond Missions.com.
And you know, if there's anything for listeners and viewers, what can you take away from this? What do you want them to walk away with from this conversation?
I guess just that you know, the way God does evangelization to us is that he steps into our messiness and he loves us in that, and that's what we can do too, you know.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Our special guest today has been Righteous Bee, Bob Lesnefsky. You could find him with Vagabond Ministries. You could go to Steubenville University and get to know him there. But I hope you enjoy this conversation and realize that God uses us sometimes to be clickbaitable. And more importantly, I hope you enjoy this conversation with a man who you obviously can't judge a book by its cover, but as soon as you open it up, you see some goodness. Stay hungry for God. God bless you.